Hey everybody, it's Alan. So this video is about two types of things to not say to trans people. These things have come back into my mind since I've been visiting YouTube again, or the comments on my videos on YouTube at any rate, in the last week or so since posting my video that was the first one I posted in a year. And, so I have gotten very many very positive comments, which I am very appreciative of. Thank you. That really means a lot to me and reminds me of why I am on YouTube, which is to help people. So it's a very wonderful reminder. But there are always some problematic comments. So the first thing to not say to trans people is the, I think, well-intentioned supposed compliment that's actually not really a compliment because it's problematic, is saying, like, oh wow, I would have never known you were trans. You look great. Like, you totally look like a man. I wouldn't have, like, you don't look trans. I wouldn't have thought you were trans. Please don't say things like that. I get that it can be meant as a compliment, but if you look underneath, it is actually problematic because what that is implying is it's better to not look trans and looking trans is bad. So that's saying negative things about being trans. And it's not a universal truth. It's not an inherent truth that looking trans or being trans is negative. That's just a cultural construct. There's nothing inherently bad about being trans. It's just that it's like a cultural norm that people tend to think it's bad to be trans, but it's not. Just being a human, there's nothing wrong with that. You're not hurting anybody. And, you know, in fact, acknowledging that oneself is trans and transitioning are really important foundational kindnesses to oneself, as opposed to the unkindness of repressing yourself and being something that you're not. And kind of getting back to the topic, so if you give somebody the compliment that they don't look trans, you're also overlooking the fact that some trans people are fine with looking trans, and they may not be trying to look or like be read as cisgender. And then also some trans people, even if they wanted to or were trying to, may not be read as cisgender or may not be read as their real gender. So if you compliment somebody for not looking trans, you're basically saying that those people who are not read as their real gender are like losers or something, that's offensive. So you're not doing anybody any good by giving that compliment to anybody. Because even if it's even if you're saying it to me and it's meant as a compliment, and even if I'm like, well, yeah, I am read as cisgender all the time, but it's still offensive to me because it's offensive to trans people in general, so I'm not into that. And then the other thing to not say to trans people, or to not say about trans people to anybody, is these negative words about transition, which people often use about medical transition, particularly transition-related surgeries. These negative words I'm talking about are words that might not seem negative on the surface, but if you look into it, they actually are, like extreme and drastic and related words. And a particularly negative one, which might be upsetting for trans people to hear, just a content warning, it's not a graphic one, but it's kind of offensive, is mutilation in the context of like people using that to refer to transition surgeries. So like, for example, I had a comment, I mean, there have been multiple comments, but I'm thinking of one in particular that I looked at recently that was from a while back on my video where I said that I was no longer considering getting lower surgery. And the person was meaning to be kind, I think, and was saying kind things to me, except they said something to the effect of like, oh, I'm so glad you're not going to mutilate your genitals with the surgery. And that just sounds so negative. Like, you're saying that surgeries that trans people might consider or undertake because they need to for their mental health and for unity of mind and body, and maybe in some people's cases to reduce their depression, reduce suicidality, like, you're saying that that's like weird and negative, which is the connotation of mutilation, or more than weird, that it's like wrong and crazy and bad. So that's not okay. If you're saying that, that just reveals basically a fundamental ignorance of what being trans and transitioning is about and why it matters. And then on somewhat of a same note with the words like extreme and drastic, it sounds negative and it shows an ignorance of why a trans person would consider or undertake trans surgeries. So it's offensive, and it's implying that somebody doing something that is really important for their needs, for their mental health, and maybe to help them avoid committing suicide, like you're saying that that is bad or like freaky or too out there or something. So that's offensive and ignorant. And in case this helps make the point, like, I don't think most people, or as many people, would say those things to a cisgender person who may need similar surgeries. Like, if a cisgender person, meaning somebody who's born with their right gender, like, say, a cisgender man who was assigned male at birth, and say he has, like, larger than his typical chest areas, like breast tissue, and he needs to have chest surgery to get rid of that breast tissue so that he can feel like his body is more consistent with his inner sense of his gender, and so that he has an easier time socially, you know, without people giving him a hard time and stuff, or whatever the case may be. Like, I think that people would probably respond to him something more like, like, oh, well, I'm sorry you have to go through a surgery, but it makes sense. Like, if I were in your shoes, I would probably consider that too. Rather than saying, oh, that's drastic. So that difference in people's responses between cis and trans people, that is implying or revealing that you are looking at trans and cis people as different, or their gender identities as different, like that a trans person's gender identity, like mine, is different from a cis man's identity. Or it could even imply that maybe consciously or subconsciously you're thinking of the trans man as a woman to some degree, which is incorrect and ignorant and offensive and very alienating. That's not doing anybody any good. And if you're like scared of the trans person's surgery and you care about the person and you're trying to like get them to like consider the surgery more carefully, or like which they're probably already doing, and like if you're trying to dissuade them from doing it, that means you're not getting it, and that's not helping anybody. You're just like not understanding their reality, or not understanding reality, period. Which is that trans people are real, and that it is really important for trans people to transition in the way that they feel they need to. And this is what I thought about at the beginning of my transition, when I was coming up against these things in my own life with people that I would talk to, and I would think to myself, and I don't know if I had the courage to really express this to them or not, but I would think like, okay, so I'm gonna have top surgery that's not going below the muscle. And, well, I shouldn't even say that, because what the surgery involves is not even the point. Like, that's not even relevant, because it's about needing it or not. And so I won't even get into that. But, okay, so there's the surgery versus living a fake life and being depressed every day about having a body that is not my actual gender, and not being myself, and I wasn't quite in this state at that time myself, but so many trans people are on the verge of suicide or have attempted suicide. And so, like, what's more drastic? Surgery that helps you be happier and have better mental health and be more self-actualized and not hate life? Or killing yourself? Which of those is more extreme? So that's something to keep in mind. Like, you know, regardless of anybody's mental state or anything, like, it just comes down to, like, it's just negative. Like, saying those words is negative and offensive and just ignorant. That's not helping. So just ask yourself, maybe for one thing, would you say that to a cisgender person who was considering a similar surgery? Like, you know, like the example with the man, the chest. And then if you would say that to a cisgender person, well, then maybe you shouldn't, because it's their own choice and their own needs, and let them have their own needs before putting your judgment on it. So just consider the words that you're using, and consider, is that implying something bad about being trans? And is it implying that you're like devaluing the person's identity or mental health or whatever? Do you need to learn a little bit more or listen a bit more before saying stuff? Anyway, okay, bring it to an end. Thank you for listening, and I really hope that you'll keep these things in mind. And especially, you know, if you're not a trans person and haven't thought about these things too much, thank you for listening. I hope that that'll ultimately help a trans person in your life. All right, bye.